Often called North Korea's real national anthem, or North Korea's internal national anthem, the Song of General Kim Il-sung is a song whose influence cannot be understated. Now that sounds like a bold statement, especially for those of you who have seen this. However, as we will explain throughout this video, understanding the impact of the Song of General Kim Il-sung is central for grasping the role played by the cult of personality in the political system of the DPRK. There is a reason Kim Il-sung is called, to quote the song, the shining sun of Korea, democratic and free. And that is because the DPRK has carefully crafted a political system and worldview wherein the Kim patriarch and family are ascribed quasi-divine abilities of delivering all happiness and victory imaginable. But of course, it's just a song. How important can it be? Is it really that important in the personality cult of the DPRK? To answer these questions, we must rewind ourselves in time to understand the historical context of Korea at the time the song was written, immediately following the end of World War II. In 1945, after the end of the Second World War, the Soviet Union inherited the northern half of Korea while the United States occupied the southern half. According to The Real North Korea by Dr. Andrei Lankov, the situation was difficult for the Soviets. On one hand, they wanted to initiate a set of communist reforms to mold the nascent North Korean state into a friendly people's democracy, the term then used for socialist client states. This would include a variety of reforms that were, at the time, not unpopular with the local populace, such as the nationalization of industry and, more especially, the redistribution of land away from wealthy landlords to small tenant peasants. However, North Korea simply lacked the kinds of support structures the Soviets needed to initiate these policies. There was no underground Communist Party, as the Japanese had suppressed it, with most surviving communists fleeing to China, the Soviet Union, or the Communist Party of Korea, still then alive in the South, which was inaccessible owing to the US occupation. Worse yet, those communists who were of Korean ethnicity had spent most of their time operating under the command of either the Chinese Communist Party or the Red Army. This meant that the most powerful man in the country, the Soviet General Terentij Shtaikov, my apologies if I mispronounced that, had no immediate candidate at the helm of the leadership of the new pro-Soviet North Korean state. Initially, he and his staff leaned towards appointing the North Korean anti-Japanese leader Cho Man-sik, but he was a right-wing nationalist who was not amendable to being the figurehead of a Soviet puppet state whose policies were nakedly dictated by Moscow. Moreover, he was actively opposed to some of even the most basic reforms advocated by the newfound occupiers. In an attempt to rectify this power vacuum, the Soviets selected one of their own, a charismatic young officer. Some records indicate he held the Red Army rank of captain, others indicate major. This young man went by the nom de guerre Kim Il-sung, though he was born into a middle-class Presbyterian family as Kim Jong-Ju. This name, translated in a romantic way, loosely means Kim become the sun. There's actually not a whole lot we know about Kim's life as a guerrilla, but what was abundantly clear to the Soviets was that he spoke Russian, had fought against the Japanese in both Korea and Manchuria under the command of the Communist Party of China, and was somewhat well-known and popular with the locals of the territory they had inherited. Even though his Korean was limited owing to an education conducted primarily in Chinese, and which ended in the equivalent of grade 10, he proved to be charismatic and a fast study. However, what Kim lacked now was legitimacy. He had spent the majority of his adult career fighting under the CCP command in China, or in exile in the Soviet Union, and was a mere 33 years old when he returned to Korea in 1945. As a result, it became important to raise Kim Il-sung's popularity, and thus this new Song of General Kim Il-sung was born out of the intent to bolster his revolutionary credentials by romanticizing and exaggerating his role in Korean independence. However, General Shtaikov couldn't have been aware of what he had just created. This young Korean was of a strongly independent mind in his search for a form of national communism, and whilst he appreciated inheriting the throne from Moscow, he had no intention of having his regime's policies be dictated from it. According to Songs for the Great Leaders by Dr. Keith Howard, a historian of the musical history of the DPRK, the Song of General Kim Il-sung was written by a guerrilla-aligned composer named Kim Wong-seon in 1946. Whether Wong-seon was an actual comrade-in-arms of Kim Il-sung or just a sympathizer could not be found in any sources, though he would go on to become one of the most important state composers of the DPRK. The timing for the release of the Song of General Kim Il-sung was very clear. Kim Il-sung had just been appointed the head of the transitional Soviet puppet regime that would be formally declared as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea on September 8, 1948, after being personally approved by Stalin himself. In preparation for the creation of this satellite regime, the former captain's reputation needed to be polished beyond reproach. The song itself was written in an AABB format with 3 stanzas with a chorus, and a bridge between the second and final stanzas. It has evident Chinese and Russian influence in addition to domestic Korean notes. If you listen closely to the format and lyrics, it is the opinion of the authors of this piece that there is more than a little of the Chinese Song of the People's Liberation Army, and the Soviet Invincible and Legendary contained within. When we look at the lyrics of the song, we see that they are designed to play up the significance of Kim Il-sung's guerrilla career, reality be damned. The most glaring inaccuracy is the rank ascribed to Kim. He is dubbed as a Jong-Un, or 4-star general in Korean, even though he never held any rank close to this in any organization, Korean, Chinese, or Soviet. Continuing on to the first stanza, the opening lines refer specifically to the North Korean geography, in the form of the Cheongbek Mountains and the Anmok River, with the words implying that the blood in them is that of the tyrannical Japanese mingled with those of heroic Korean resistance fighters, ostensibly under Kim Il-sung. The fact that these fighters never numbered more than a couple hundred or possibly 1,000 is never mentioned. Also, conspicuously absent are places such as Seoul, which despite being the largest city on the Korean peninsula, Kim had never visited and was under the control of the United States. In the next stanza, we see references to the blizzards of the Manchurian plains, admitting tacitly that the Korean fighters under Kim's command had been kicked out of Korea proper. What it ignores was that these bedraggled fighters now found themselves directly under the command of the Chinese Communist Party, effectively ending their status as an independent Korean resistance group, which from that point on engaged in a guerrilla conflict characterized by Dr. Lankov as heroic but futile. To put these words into perspective, the largest and most successful known engagement between Kim Il-sung's rebels and the Japanese is known as the Battle of Pochonbo in 1937, where, according to local accounts, a small group of 150 men, allegedly led by Kim Il-sung, attacked a Japanese garrison in the sleepy town of Pochonbo, whereby Kim Il-sung and his rebels held the town for a few hours before making a hasty retreat. However, sources surrounding the battle are scarce and can hardly be considered reliable as they tend to originate from North Korean sources. Moving on, there are no references here to the fact that these same soldiers were subsequently scattered even more. Some remained in China, but others, including Kim Il-sung himself, retreated to the Soviet Union and were incorporated into a primarily Soviet-Korean formation called the 88th Brigade. This brigade later became an important place whence much of the future elite of the DPRK were drawn. In fact, almost every single future high-ranking member of the North Korean regime had been from these handful of guerrillas in some capacity. What did become certain by 1946 and 1947 was that the newly minted General Kim was here to stay. Having been appointed to the rank of general by the Soviet authorities in recognition of the role he was to play in the new regime, he was also made the effective, although not ceremonial, head of the Workers' Party of Korea, the single communist party permitted any power in North Korea, and granted the title of Prime Minister. This is one of the earliest examples of a communist leader having this much power simultaneously. As such, the Song of General Kim Il-sung became sung with increasing frequency by all members of North Korean society. In speeches all the way up to the founding of the Republic on September 8, 1948, the national anthem used by the fledgling country was the pre-war Pan-Korean version of Auld Lang Syne, followed immediately by the Song of General Kim Il-sung. Aegukka, the patriotic song and the official national anthem, was only used as the North Korean anthem after the DPRK had been officially declared with Soviet approval, and even then was always played immediately prior to the Song of General Kim Il-sung. The personality cult had been born with what seemed like an innocuous song, and would only snowball in its centrality to the authority of the state from here on. It was also about this time that Kim began referring to himself as the Great Leader, much to the reported bemusement of his Soviet handlers. From the very beginning, this song was a part of indoctrinating the children of North Korea into thinking of Kim Il-sung not just as the father of the nation, but as a personal parental figure. If we look at this early picture from a speech given in early 1948 prior to the creation of the DPRK and its national flag, we see the portrait of Kim Il-sung next to the flags of the older Korean Empire, which now strongly resembles the flag of the DPRK's arch-rivals in the south. The inscription also notes that General Kim Il-sung is the father of the Korean family. Moreover, Korean children in the north were required to sing this song instead of the national anthem in front of a portrait of Kim Il-sung every single morning. The second thing to note about the song is again the family connection. It was the song that was present at the birth of the myth of the Mount Paektu bloodline. This modern legend might make Campbell shudder, but it is a romantic version of history wherein Kim Il-sung is the hero of 1,000 Faces specifically chosen to lead Korea, and only chosen members of his family are fit to lead the DPRK or a future united Korea. This would have implications later when Kim Il-sung moved to appoint his son, Kim Jong-Il, as his successor. By the beginning of the Korean War, Kim Il-sung had been granted a promotion to the rank of Marshal, thus meaning that in his own song he was of a junior rank to the one in which he possessed. What was certainly true was that on July 12, 1950, when the Korean People's Army started their surprise attack on the south, the soldiers involved in this attack sang the Song of General Kim Il-sung in all liberated areas. As there were many communist sympathizers in the South who assisted the KPA, it is very possible that many of these collaborators also became familiar with the song, explaining why it became banned under the blanket anti-DPRK defense laws of the various South Korean military dictatorships which followed the war, and which remain in place to this day. With the end of the war and both sides claiming victory, the divided Korea with which we are all familiar with became a permanent political reality. Kim Il-sung himself began to continue to expand his power base within the north, curtailing Soviet and Chinese influence and promoting fellow guerrillas from his Manchurian and 88th Brigade days in the Red Army to increasingly important positions of power. Meanwhile, he purged any leaders in North Korea who had been major communists prior to his return in 1946, and especially those who had fled from the south in the wake of the stalemate of the Korean War. As such, the cult of Kim Il-sung grew in stature and power, and the ruling Workers' Party of Korea became increasingly a Korean nationalist organization as much as a communist one. Even in 1955, prior to de-Stalinization, the relations of the Workers' Party of Korea and Kim Il-sung regime appear to have become somewhat icy with other socialist states and communist parties, as revealed by various classified documents from the Hungarian and East German archives. In 1957, the increased nationalism and deviation from other members of the Communist bloc came to a head when pro-Soviet and Chinese factions in the Workers' Party of Korea, the ruling Communist Party of the DPRK party-state apparatus, attempted to challenge and oust Kim Il-sung and organize a set of liberalizing reforms. What they had not counted on, according to Dr. Lankov, was the fact that many people in the new North Korean state enthusiastically supported Kim Il-sung and owed their positions to what they viewed as his benevolence, and so the challenge was resoundingly defeated. The direct result of this was the final opposition to the ever-growing cult of personality finally died a painful death, with any leaders who had not been partisan comrades of Kim Il-sung being executed, imprisoned, or fired. The cult of the Great Leader would only expand from this point in 1957, and central to it was the constant playing of the Song of General Kim Il-sung, which taught Koreans that they didn't owe their allegiances so much to the DPR government or to the Workers' Party of Korea, but to Kim Il-sung personally. Perhaps it is a violation of Goodwin's law, but the continued overuse of this song in post-1957 North Korea has some similarities to the required oath that all German soldiers were required to take of personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler. Much like in the Third Reich, where awards and honors were given in the name of the Führer, so too were honors and awards now given to DPRK citizens and KPA veterans in the name of the great leader Kim Il-sung. The highest order of merit in North Korea? The Order of Kim Il-sung, of course. The song of General Kim Il-sung from here on out could be heard at every single major state event, every parade, and every foreign visit. Indeed, when Nikolai Ceausescu visited the DPRK in 1978, this was the song with which his motorcade was welcomed into Pyongyang. Apparently, it left such an impression that Ceausescu would go on to cultivate his own cult modern on near-identical lines. A keynote to remember about the song, however, was twofold. First, on one hand, it became one of the first, if not the first, songs that all children learned. According to filmmaker Kim Deok-young, director of the film Children of Kim Il-sung, being outside the DPRK was no reason not to participate in the cult of personality. Even war orphans sheltering in friendly socialist countries in Eastern Europe were required to sing the song in front of a portrait of Kim, much like their peers still in North Korea. The director has found documentary evidence of old Bulgarian and Polish people who can sing the song of General Kim Il-sung word for word in Korean due to how often these children were required to harmonize it. The song therefore has become a foundation to building the prestige of the Kim dynasty, which explains its continued ubiquity at every single major military parade and event in the DPRK. However, to follow with the comments of Dr. Keith Howard, the song seems to be for internal consumption only, as the authors of this video have found plenty of examples of foreign performers, such as Russian military choirs or North Korean sympathizers, singing the song in North Korea for a North Korean audience. However, even though the choir of the Korean People's Army, Pochonbo Lonic Ensemble, and the Moranbong Band, the faces of North Korean music, have all toured, not once have they played the song of General Kim Il-sung on foreign soil. This is very much music by the regime, for the interests of the regime, for the consumption of the subjects of the regime. The last fascinating thing about the song isn't just its longevity, but its evolution. In the late 1970s, Kim Il-sung decided that it would be best for the stability of the regime not to follow the model of other communist countries and liberalize, or devolve power from one person into a collective leadership. Instead, he opted to turn North Korea into the only communist hereditary monarchy on the planet. He therefore made moves to appoint his son, Kim Jong-Il, ostensibly born on Mount Paektu, as his heir. However, his son had grown up as a pampered princeling in the palaces of Pyongyang. How then to bolster the image of his son? The answer came in the form of another song. The song of General Kim Jong-il had been written to set up his credentials, with Kim Jong-il in the ascendancy to the leadership at the behest of his father. The younger Kim was also promoted to 4-star general, and the song was created to praise his literally non-existent achievements or experiences. There is not as much information about this song in English, but it seems to have been written in the 1980s due to Kim Jong-il's anointment as heir, reaching particular prominence in the 1990s after his ascension to power. It has a similar AABB tune and is designed to sound not unlike the song about his father. Interestingly, it does not really ascribe any discernible achievements to Kim Jong-il, but instead asserts that North Korea is a beautiful country and that Kim Jong-il is its most stalwart defender. One wonders if Team America World Police's song Ronery may not have been a better fit. No matter, the songs became a part of the personality cult of both, although the song of General Kim Jong-il was not played without ceasing at every major state event until after the death of the eponymous dictator in 2011, Without a doubt, Kim Jong-Un was concerned with shoring up his own legitimacy and elevating the role of this new song. Much like the ubiquitous leader's portraits placed in every house and public place and located on the chest pins of the leader badges worn by every North Korean, these two songs are now played at every major domestic event. They are also played back-to-back every morning at the startup of the Korean Central News Agency's broadcasting days to ensure that North Koreans remember that just because their leaders are dead doesn't mean their cult is not in charge. On the surface, the Song of General Kim Il-sung might just be one of the many kinds of rousing Stalinist songs from the former communist bloc. However, we hope that we've proven here that the Song of General Kim Il-sung was in many ways the birthing tool of the entire cult of the Kim family, one which has only evolved as his son and grandson have continued to take over. We can't tell the future, but it only seems like a matter of time before a Song of General Kim Jong-Un joins the company of the young dictator's patriarchs at all public events within the DPRK.